There is something about the last hour of driving, when the light begins to soften and the road ahead starts to blur just a little at the edges, that makes a traveler's whole body lean toward rest. The sun has been dropping steadily behind the flat line of the horizon, painting the sky in those long, unhurried washes of amber and rose that only seem to appear when you have been watching the road long enough to stop noticing it. The fields on either side of the highway have gone quiet in the way that fields do at dusk. The grass is settling, the birds finding their branches. The whole wide American landscape easing itself into something slower and softer than the bright business of the afternoon. This is the 1950s, and the roads are full. Not crowded in the way we might think of today, but full in a particular and hopeful way. Full of families in wide-bodied automobiles, their chrome bumpers catching the last of the daylight, their trunks packed with suitcases and folded road maps and paper bags of sandwiches that were eaten somewhere around noon. The cars are large and they are comfortable, and they have been rolling since early morning, since the dew was still on the grass and the coffee thermos was still hot. The children in the back seat have long since stopped counting license plates. They are leaning against the window glass or against each other, their shoes kicked off, their eyes heavy with miles. The driver, perhaps a father in a short-sleeved shirt, with the window cranked down just enough to let the evening air move through, has been watching the roadside for the past 20 minutes or so. Not anxiously, not urgently, but with that particular kind of patient attention that comes when you know what you are looking for and you trust that it will appear. And it always does appear, somewhere along these American highways in the years after the war. Somewhere between the gas stations and the diners and the long flat stretches of farmland. It appears first as a soft glow on the horizon, a warm blush of color that is not quite the sunset. That seems to be sitting lower and closer to the earth than the sky above it. Then it becomes something more distinct. A shape, a structure, a row of small doors facing the road. And above it all, rising into the deepening blue of the evening sky, the sign. The sign is something worth pausing over, because in this era the sign is everything. It is the motel's first and warmest greeting, its way of reaching out across the distance and saying, "Here, come here, there is a place for you." These signs are built to be seen from a distance. Tall and bright, sometimes shaped like arrows pointing downward toward the entrance. Sometimes spelling out a name in letters that glow with a warmth that seems almost personal. The neon is pink and turquoise, and a particular shade of orange that looks like a campfire seen through glass. It hums very faintly, with a sound that you would only notice if you were standing close to it in the quiet of the evening. A low and steady electrical murmur that is somehow not unpleasant. That is in fact rather companionable, like the sound of something alive and content. The name on the sign might be the starlight, or the sunset, or the blue bonnet, or the palms, even here in a place where there are no palms for 1,000 miles. The names are aspirational and gentle. They suggest comfort, they suggest arrival. They suggest that whatever the road has been, this place is something else. Some signs have a smaller panel beneath the main letters, the kind that can be changed by hand, where the manager has placed white plastic letters spelling out vacancy, or the weekly rate, or perhaps simply the word welcome. Because in this era of American travel, the welcome is genuine and the vacancy is almost always there. The car slows. This is one of the small and satisfying rituals of a long day's driving. This moment of slowing, of signaling, of turning off the highway and into the gravel or the blacktop of the motel's entrance drive. The tires make a different sound as they leave the highway, a softer, more deliberate crunching, and the whole car seems to exhale a little, seems to settle into a gentler pace as it rolls toward the office. The children in the back seat stir. Someone sits up and looks out the window. Someone else asks, "Are we stopping here?" And the answer is yes. Yes, we are stopping here. And there is a small and quiet happiness in that. The office is easy to find. It is almost always at one end of the long, low building, set slightly apart or slightly forward, with a large window through which you can see the warm interior light and sometimes the figure of the manager or the manager's wife moving behind the desk. There is often a lamp on the counter, one of those simple hourglass-shaped lamps with a shade the color of cream, and its light spills out through the window and onto the gravel in a way that looks genuinely inviting. There might be a small sign in the window, hand-lettered or printed, that says office, or ring bell for service, though in the early evening the bell is rarely necessary because someone is almost always there. The parking lot, if you can call it that, is more of a long strip running parallel to the row of rooms, with a space in front of each door, so that when you have checked in you can pull the car right up to your own little door and carry your bags only the shortest possible distance. This is a practical arrangement and also a pleasing one. It makes the motel feel intimate in a way that a large hotel never quite does. Each room has its own door facing the outside world, its own small window with curtains that glow softly from the lamp within, its own number mounted in metal above the door frame. The numbers are often in that particular mid-century style, slightly stylized, leaning forward as if in motion, as if even the numbers are going somewhere. Before the car door opens, there is a moment of stillness. The engine has been turned off and the road noise has stopped, and the evening air comes in through the cracked windows, carrying with it the smell of the countryside, of cut grass and warm asphalt still releasing the heat of the day. And something else, something faintly sweet and chemical, that is the neon sign doing its quiet work in the dusk. The family sits for just a moment in the parked car, not because there is any reason to wait, but because the body takes a little time to understand that the moving is finished, that this is the place, that the day has arrived at its natural end. Then the door opens and the gravel crunches underfoot and the air is warmer than expected, holding the last of the afternoon's heat. And the neon sign above hums its soft electrical note, and the sky above the sign is the deep blue of early evening. Not quite dark, still holding a thin line of pale gold along the western edge where the sun has just gone down. There are crickets, or there will be soon. There is the distant sound of another car passing on the highway, its headlights sweeping briefly across the front of the motel and then gone, continuing on to wherever it is going. The walk to the office is only a few steps. The door is often glass with a metal handle worn smooth by many hands, and it opens with a small bell, a real bell this time. A little brass one mounted on a spring above the door, and the sound it makes is clear and friendly and not at all demanding. The office smells of coffee and of the particular cleaning product that was used on the linoleum floor sometime earlier in the day. A faint pine or lemon smell that has settled into something comfortable and domestic. There might be a small rack of postcards near the door. Pictures of local attractions, or simply pictures of the motel itself taken in bright afternoon sunlight. The kind of postcards that travelers buy with every intention of sending, and sometimes actually do. The manager appears or was already there, standing or sitting behind the counter with a ledger book open in front of them. In this era, the ledger is a real book. A large flat one with columns ruled in faint blue lines. And the manager writes in it with a pen, recording the names and the license plate numbers and the room assignments in a handwriting that varies from place to place. From careful and precise to loose and hurried, depending on how busy the evening has been. The transaction is simple and unhurried. A room is available, a rate is agreed upon. A key is produced, the key is a real key. Heavy and satisfying in the hand. Attached to a diamond-shaped plastic fob with the room number printed on it in white. Or sometimes stamped into the plastic itself. The weight of the key is reassuring. It is a solid thing, a thing that means something. There might be a brief exchange of pleasantries, a question about how far you have come today, a comment about the weather, a mild recommendation for the diner down the road if you are thinking about supper. The manager's manner is matter-of-fact and kind in the way of people who do this every evening, who have welcomed hundreds of tired travelers through this same glass door, who understand without being told that what a person needs after a long day on the road is not much conversation, but a little warmth and the knowledge that everything is in order. The room is ready, the towels are clean. The ice machine is just around the corner. Second door on the left. And then you are back outside in the warm evening air with the key in your hand and the car to move and the bags to carry and the small and very specific pleasure of finding your door. Your number, your particular rectangle of the motel's long face. You pull the car forward until it sits squarely in front of room number 7. Or 12 or 23, and you turn off the engine again, and this time you get out and stretch. Really stretch, arms above the head. Back arching, the whole body remembering that it has been folded into the same position for 8 or 9 hours, and is very glad to be otherwise. The evening air moves across your arms. The neon sign colors everything faintly pink and blue. The key goes into the lock and the lock turns with a solid and satisfying click, and the door swings inward and the smell of the room comes out to meet you. It is a particular smell, not unpleasant, that belongs to motel rooms of this era and no other. There is something of fresh linen in it, something of the cleaning products used on the bathroom tiles. Something faintly of the outdoors that has come in through the air conditioning unit mounted in the window, which is running at a low setting and producing a steady and rather soothing hum. The room is cool after the warmth of the evening outside, and the coolness feels like a small luxury, feels like something that has been prepared specifically for you. The light in the room comes from a lamp on the nightstand between the two beds, already switched on by the housekeeper when she turned down the bedspreads, and its warm circle of light makes the room feel settled and ready. The bedspreads are something to notice, because in this era they are often remarkable, patterned in geometric shapes or stylized flowers in colors that are vivid in a cheerful and uncomplicated way. Turquoise and gold and a coral pink that matches the neon outside. The pillows are large and the mattress, when you sit on the edge of it, gives in a way that is neither too soft nor too firm. That is simply accommodating, that says yes. Lie down, you have earned this. The bathroom is small and clean with white tile and a chrome faucet that gleams. There are 2 small bars of soap wrapped in paper, and 2 thin but perfectly adequate towels folded over the towel bar, and a drinking glass wrapped in a paper sleeve sitting on the edge of the sink. The mirror above the sink is lit from above by a fluorescent tube that flickers once when you turn it on and then settles into its steady pale light. Everything in the bathroom is in its place. Everything has been thought of. Outside, the evening is continuing its slow and comfortable deepening. The sky above the motel sign has gone from deep blue to something closer to purple, and the first stars are appearing, faint and then firmer, arranging themselves in their old patterns above the flat American landscape. The highway runs on in both directions, its white lines disappearing into the dark, carrying other travelers toward other stopping places. Somewhere down the row of rooms, a door opens and closes. Somewhere the ice machine cycles on with a clunking and rumbling that is not quite loud enough to be intrusive. That is in fact rather cozy in the way of mechanical sounds that mean everything is working as it should. The family settles, bags are unzipped. Shoes are finally completely removed. Someone runs water in the bathroom sink. Someone else pulls back the bedspread and sits against the headboard with a sigh that contains the whole long day. The miles of highway, the heat of the afternoon, the steady hum of the engine, and now this, the cool and lamplit quiet of a room that is theirs for the night. The neon sign goes on glowing outside the window, its light finding the edges of the curtains and lying in soft colored lines across the carpet. Pink and blue, steady and calm. Tomorrow the road will begin again. The maps will be unfolded. The thermos will be refilled. The engine will turn over in the early morning air. But that is tomorrow, and tonight there is only this room. This lamp, this bedspread in its cheerful colors. This cool and humming quiet. The day has come to its gentle end here, in a small room facing a highway, under a neon sign that goes on softly glowing in the dark, welcoming whoever else might be making their way along the road and looking, as travelers always have, for a place to rest. And so they came one by one, or sometimes 2 by 2, pulling off the highway with that particular mixture of tiredness and relief that only a long day of driving can produce. They came with their windows fogged from the warmth inside the car, with children asleep across the back seat, with the smell of coffee from a roadside diner still faintly caught in their clothes. And what greeted them before anything else was the office. It was almost always a small room. That is worth sitting with for a moment. How small it was and how much it held. In the motels that lined the great American highways through those years, the office was rarely larger than a modest sitting room, and sometimes considerably smaller than that. A single wide window faced the parking lot and the road beyond, and through that window the proprietor could watch the slow parade of headlights moving through the dark, could see a car slow and signal and turn, could begin to straighten up and prepare a welcome before the driver had even stepped out onto the asphalt. The window itself was often framed with a thin curtain, something practical in a cheerful color, a yellow cotton print perhaps, or a pale green that had faded gently over several summers into something softer than its original intention. On the glass or on a small sign propped just inside it, The word vacancy glowed or was printed in neat block letters. And that single word carried with it a kind of quiet generosity, an assurance that there was room, that someone had been expecting you, more or less, and that the night need not be spent in the car. You would push open the door, and a small bell would announce you. Not a loud bell, nothing startling. Just a light, bright little chime. The kind that had been tinkling in shops and offices for decades before this one, and would go on tinkling for decades after. It said simply, "Someone is here." And from behind a low counter, or from a back room where the television murmured softly, the proprietor would appear. In those years, the motel was very often a family enterprise, and the person who appeared might be the owner himself, a man in his 40s perhaps, with the particular unhurried manner of someone who has learned that most things in life proceed more smoothly when you do not rush them. Or it might be his wife, equally capable, equally at ease, with a warmth that was genuine rather than performed. The warmth of someone who has welcomed strangers through that same door on many hundreds of evenings and found, on balance, that strangers are mostly just tired people who want a clean room and a little kindness. Sometimes it was a grown son or daughter, learning the rhythms of the place, already absorbing that same quality of calm attentiveness. The counter itself was a lovely piece of the American vernacular. It was usually wood, sometimes formica in one of those colors that the decade favored. A warm tan or a soft coral, or a green that echoed the color of shallow water. Behind it, the wall held the key rack, which was one of the most quietly satisfying objects in the whole architecture of mid-century travel. It was simply a board with hooks, each hook numbered to correspond with a room, and from each hook hung a key on a substantial tag, a diamond of hard plastic or a flat piece of stamped metal, with the room number pressed into it in large, clear numerals. When most of the hooks held their keys, you knew the motel was quiet. When many hooks were bare, you knew the place was full of sleeping travelers, each key sitting on a nightstand somewhere, or tucked into a jacket pocket, doing its small duty of belonging to a particular door on a particular night. The register lay open on the counter. It was a large, flat book, bound in a dark cover that had grown supple with handling, and its pages were lined with columns for names and addresses and the make and year of the automobile. Because in those years the car was as much a part of your identity as anything else, and noting it down was simply part of the ritual. The proprietor would turn the book toward you and offer a pen, often a pen on a small chain, though the chain was more a gesture toward practicality than any statement of distrust. And you would write your name in the particular handwriting you had been using all your life, the same signature you wrote on checks and letters and birthday cards, now inscribed in this ledger alongside the names of salesmen and honeymooners and families on their way to see relatives in states they had never visited before. There was something almost ceremonial about the signing of the register, though no one would have called it that. It was simply what you did. You arrived, you signed your name. You were given a key. But the act of writing your name in that book was a kind of acknowledgement that you had been somewhere, that you had passed through, that on this particular Tuesday in July or this Thursday in October, you had stopped here at this place, along this road, and the world had noted it down in its quiet way. Imagine the smell of that office for a moment. There would be coffee almost always, a percolator somewhere nearby, either still warm from the evening or already set up for the morning. Its faint metallic and roasted scent woven into the air of the room. There might be the smell of whatever the family had eaten for dinner. Something homely and warm drifting in from behind the door that connected the office to the living quarters. Because in a family motel, the two were rarely far apart. There would be the cline, slightly chemical smell of the mimeographed local maps that sat in a small stack on the counter. Free for the taking, printed by the Chamber of Commerce of whatever town lay nearest, showing the locations of diners and filling stations and points of modest local interest. And underneath all of it, the particular smell of a room that is lived in during the day and worked in during the evening. A smell that is neither home nor workplace, but something of both. Something that belongs entirely to this particular American institution. The proprietor would tell you the room number, and perhaps mention that the ice machine was just around the corner past room 6, or that the soft drink machine took dimes and was reliable. Mostly, though sometimes the orange crush got stuck and you had to give it a gentle encouragement. These small advisories were delivered in the tone of a neighbor sharing useful information over a fence. Friendly, specific, without any particular fuss. The motel keeper knew his property the way a gardener knows a garden. Every quirk and tendency, every door that swelled a little in humid weather. Every faucet that needed a moment to find its temperature. The rates were posted on a small card, or sometimes painted directly onto a board hung on the wall. And they were modest by any measure. A few dollars for a single room, a little more for a double, with a small additional charge if you wanted a television, which by the middle years of the decade had become something that many travelers expected and most proprietors were glad to provide. The transaction was cash almost always, counted out onto the counter and received with a nod. The bills folded into a drawer or a metal box beneath the counter with the same matter-of-fact ease that had attended every other part of the exchange. And then the key was in your hand. That was the moment, the weight of the key, the cool solidity of the tag with its number, the slight roughness of the metal against your palm. It was such a simple object, and it meant so much in the particular grammar of travel. It meant that for this night, that room was yours, the bed in it, the lamp on the nightstand, the towels folded on the rack in the bathroom, the view from the window out onto the parking lot and the road and whatever darkness lay beyond. All of it was yours for the hours between now and checkout, which was typically 10 or 11 in the morning. The proprietor having mentioned it in passing with the same easy informality that had characterized everything else. You would take your leave of the office, and the little bell would chime again as the door swung shut behind you, and the proprietor would settle back into whatever the evening held. The television, a magazine, the quiet satisfaction of a few more hooks bare on the key rack. A few more names in the register. The office would resume its nighttime vigil. The window glowing warmly, the vacancy sign doing its patient work out by the road. What strikes you looking back at those offices from this distance is how personal they were. Each one carried the particular character of the family that ran it. One might have a small arrangement of silk flowers on the counter, or a framed photograph of a lake somewhere, or a dish of wrapped candies set out for guests. Another might have a bulletin board covered with local flyers, an advertisement for a fish fry at the Methodist church, a notice about a county fair, a hand-lettered card from a nearby attraction promising wonders of nature or history that were, in all probability, modest and entirely charming. These small touches were not calculated hospitality, not the result of any training or manual. They were simply the expression of people who lived in a place and worked in it and had, over time, made it their own. The guest books of those years, if you could read them now, would tell a quiet and rather beautiful story. The names would come from everywhere, from the cities and from the small towns, from states near and far, the addresses written in every variety of American handwriting. Some of it careful and schooled, some of it hurried, some of it the large looping script of someone who had learned to write in an earlier era and never changed. Salesmen with the same company name appearing week after week, their handwriting growing familiar, their room preferences perhaps noted in the proprietor's memory. Families whose names appeared once and never again, passing through on a journey that the register could only partially record. The occasional note in the remarks column, if there was one, a word of thanks, a mention of a pleasant stay, the small courtesies that people extend when they feel, even briefly, that they have been looked after. The office was also, in its quiet way, a kind of information exchange. The proprietor knew the road. He knew which diners were worth stopping at and which were better passed by. He knew where the construction was, and which route around it added only a few miles and was actually rather pleasant through the hills. He knew the weather that was coming, or thought he did with the particular confidence of someone who has watched the sky over the same stretch of land for many years. Travelers who lingered a moment at the counter might receive all of this freely, offered in the same spirit as the local maps and the advice about the ice machine. A neighborliness extended to strangers, because on the road, strangers were simply neighbors you had not yet met. By the time the last car had pulled in for the night and the last key had been handed over, the office would settle into its quietest mode. The proprietor might turn the vacancy sign to no vacancy, or simply switch it off. If the rooms were full, the register would be closed, the pen resting alongside it. The key rack would show its pattern of bare hooks, each one a room occupied. A traveler settled, a small transaction of shelter and rest completed for another night. The light in the office would dim, not go out entirely. There was usually something burning through the night. A small lamp on the counter or the blue flicker of the television in the back room, casting its pale light under the connecting door. The motel never went entirely dark or entirely silent. It breathed in its way, with the small sounds of people at rest, the distant closing of a door, the faint rush of water through pipes, the occasional soft creak of a building settling into the cooler air of the late hours. And the register lay there, holding its names, all those quiet inscriptions of passage, all those travelers who had stood at that counter with a key in their hand and a room waiting, and the particular peace that comes at the end of a long day of motion, when you have finally, for a little while, stopped. The book would be filled in time and replaced with another, and that one filled in its turn, and the names would accumulate in their unhurried way. A record of the road and the people who traveled it, Of all those evenings when someone pushed open a door and heard a small bell chime and was welcomed in out of the dark. From the office, the life of the motel extended outward in all directions. To the rooms themselves, to the walkways between them, to the small amenities that the decade had decided a traveler deserved. And it is toward those rooms now, those quiet rectangular spaces with their particular furnishings and their particular light, that we might gently turn our attention, following the path that every guest followed, key in hand, bag over shoulder, walking the short distance from the place of arrival to the place of rest. And so the walking began, that quiet procession from the car to the door, and with it came the particular ritual of unpacking, one of those small ceremonies of travel that nobody ever quite planned, but everybody seemed to perform in roughly the same way, as though the road itself had written the instructions and handed them out somewhere back along the highway without anyone noticing. The car, of course, had been carrying everything. It had been carrying the suitcases and the paper bags from the last roadside stop, and the sweater someone had meant to put on 3 hours ago, and the map that had been folded incorrectly since Tuesday and would never quite fold correctly again. It had been carrying the children's shoes that had somehow migrated to the back window shelf, and the thermos that still had a little cold coffee in it from the morning, and the box of crackers that was now mostly crumbs shifting gently in their wax paper sleeve. The car had held all of it, faithfully mile after mile, and now it sat in the parking lot in the particular stillness of a machine that has done its work for the day. The engine ticking very softly as it cooled. That gentle metallic settling sound that felt almost like a sigh. The trunk, when it opened, released a smell that was very specific to travel in that era. A mixture of warm rubber and canvas, and the faint sweetness of whatever had been packed in a hurry that morning. A bar of soap, perhaps, or the sachets that someone's mother had tucked into the corners of the suitcase, the way mothers did, with lavender or cedar or something floral that had been mixing all day with the heat and the road dust until it had become its own entirely new smell. Not quite anything you could name, but immediately recognizable as the smell of being away from home. The suitcases themselves were beautiful objects in a quiet way. The good ones were made of hard-sided fiberboard covered in a textured material that came in colors like dove gray and mint green, and a warm tan that the manufacturers called something like desert sand or harvest wheat. And the clasps were bright chrome that caught the motel's neon light and threw it back in little pink and orange sparks. The cheaper ones were soft-sided, made of a stiff cloth over a cardboard frame, and they had leather handles that had darkened with use and brass fittings that had gone slightly green at the edges. And they were entirely wonderful in their own way, honest and hardworking and completely unpretentious about what they were. A family traveling in those years might have 2 or 3 of these, plus a smaller overnight case, sometimes called a train case, even by people who had never taken a train, which was a boxy little thing with a mirror fitted inside the lid and small compartments for the things that needed to be close at hand. The cold cream and the aspirin and the comb and the small bottle of perfume that was only for traveling. The one that lived in this case and went nowhere else. Women often carried these themselves, holding them by the short handle. And there was something in the gesture, in the particular way the case was carried, that suggested both practicality and a kind of personal ceremony. A small domain of order in the middle of the looseness of the road. The father in the family that traveled together, was usually the one who managed the trunk. He would stand at the back of the car in the warm evening air and make decisions about what came in tonight and what stayed in the car until morning. And this was a genuine decision with genuine weight to it. Because nobody wanted to carry more than necessary, and nobody wanted to leave anything they would need before 7 in the morning, when the light was still gray and the air was still cool, and the only sound was the distant hiss of early traffic on the highway. The overnight bag came in. The large suitcase might stay, depending on how long they were stopping, depending on how tired everyone was, depending on a dozen small calculations that happened quickly and quietly in the amber light of the parking lot. The children, if there were children, had their own relationship to this moment. They had been in the car for hours, which is a very long time to be in a car when you are 8 years old. And the motel room represented something genuinely exciting. A new space, a space that belonged to nobody. A space where the rules were slightly different from the rules at home. Where you might get to sleep in a bed that was not your bed and watch television programs that came on at hours when you were usually already asleep. They would carry things in with great enthusiasm and without much coordination, ferrying items from the trunk to the room in a series of small trips that were more about movement than efficiency. And this was entirely fine, entirely part of the rhythm of the evening. The energy of arrival working itself out gradually through the simple act of carrying things from one place to another. The door to the room had a particular sound when it opened for the first time. The key was usually a large, flat key heavier than a house key, attached to a diamond-shaped or oval fob made of hard plastic with the room number pressed into it in white or gold numbers. And the fob was large enough that you would not accidentally put it in your pocket and take it home. Which was the whole point. The lock was a simple pin tumbler lock, and it required a certain confident pressure. A slight lift of the handle sometimes. A familiarity with the particular temperament of that individual lock. And on the first try you were usually still learning. Still getting acquainted, and the door would resist for just a moment before it gave way and swung open into the dark. The smell of the room came first. Before the light, before anything you could see. It was a clean smell. A slightly institutional clean, the smell of the industrial laundry where the sheets had been washed and dried and folded, mixed with the particular neutral smell of a room that had been empty for some hours. A room that had been cleaned and aired and made ready and was now waiting. There was sometimes the faint ghost of the previous guests. Not unpleasant, just faint, a trace of someone else's soap or hair cream or the particular smell of a brand of cigarettes that was different from the one you smoked yourself. The room had held other people and would hold others still. And this was not strange, not unsettling, just the ordinary fact of a motel room. A space that moved through time in a different way than a bedroom at home did. The light switch was usually just inside the door, and when it clicked on, the room appeared all at once in the warm light of the bedside lamps, which were already on a single circuit in many motels, so that you got the whole room illuminated at once. The two beds with their matching spreads in a pattern that might be a geometric design, or a floral, or something that tried to be both at once. The small table between them. The dresser against the wall with its large mirror. The chair in the corner that was there for sitting in, but that most people put their coat on. The bathroom door slightly ajar. The curtains already drawn against the parking lot light outside. And then the unpacking began in earnest. And it was a process that was both practical and strangely intimate. Because the act of taking things out of a suitcase and placing them in a room is also the act of making that room yours. However briefly, however temporarily, the toiletry bag went into the bathroom, which was small and clean and white, with hexagonal floor tiles and a tub with a shower attachment and small wrapped bars of soap sitting in the soap dish. And the act of placing your own things on the bathroom shelf. Your own toothbrush, your own tube of toothpaste, your own bottle of aspirin, was a quiet claim of occupancy, a gentle assertion that this space was now, for tonight, a home. The clothes that would be needed in the morning were hung in the small closet, which had a rod and a handful of wire hangers that made a light musical sound when you moved them. A thin metallic chiming, the dress or the shirt was hung carefully. Smoothed with the hand, the collar straightened. Because nobody wanted to arrive at the next destination looking as though they had slept in their clothes. And the small act of hanging something up was also an act of care for tomorrow. A kindness extended to the self that would wake up here in the morning and need to be ready for the road again. The shoes came off near the door, usually or beside the bed, and this was one of those moments that signaled the real beginning of rest. The moment when the feet were freed from the leather and the day's walking and the particular confinement of shoes worn for long hours in a car. The floor of the motel room was carpeted in most places by the middle of the decade. A low industrial carpet in a color designed to hide wear. A warm brown or a dusty green or a pattern of small shapes in several colors at once. And the feeling of that carpet under sock feet was immediately unreasonably pleasant, soft and level and clean in a way that felt like a small luxury after the long day. Someone would go to the ice machine. This was almost always the case, because the ice machine was one of the genuine pleasures of the motel experience, a novelty that had not yet become ordinary. A machine that sat at the end of the building or in a small alcove between sections and made ice continuously and gave it away freely. And this was remarkable if you thought about it, which most people did not. But the ice was there and it was free, and you carried it back in the small plastic bucket that sat on top of the bathroom toilet tank or on the dresser. And the sound of the ice in the bucket was a bright, clean, cheerful sound, a sound that meant the evening was settling in properly. The drinks that the ice was for varied by family and by preference. There might be a bottle of Coca-Cola from the machine by the office, cold and dark in its curved glass bottle, sweating slightly in the warm air. There might be something from a paper bag that had been in the back seat, a bottle of ginger ale or a root beer, or something for the adults that had been packed carefully in the suitcase, wrapped in a shirt to keep it from breaking. The ice went into the bathroom glasses, which were usually wrapped in paper sleeves and were made of a thick, slightly greenish glass that felt solid and honest in the hand. And the drink that went over the ice made a sound that was the sound of the evening beginning to slow down. The television, if it was turned on, was turned on low. The sets in motel rooms in those years were large and heavy and sat on a special shelf or on top of the dresser. And they took a moment to warm up, the picture arriving gradually out of the gray static, brightening and sharpening over the course of a minute until the image was clear and the sound was audible. And there was something in that slow arrival of the picture that was itself relaxing, a gradual coming into focus that matched the mood of the room. The programs at that hour were gentle things, variety shows with soft orchestration, or the tail end of a comedy where everyone was laughing and the problems of the episode had been resolved, or the late news read by a man in a suit who spoke in measured, unhurried tones as though nothing he was saying required any particular urgency. The window air conditioning unit, if the room had one, ran at a steady hum that was not quite a sound after a while. That became instead a kind of texture in the air, a background softness that smoothed out the other sounds. The distant traffic and the occasional car in the parking lot and the thin sound of the television in the next room. The cool air it produced smelled faintly of the machine itself, a clean metallic coolness that mixed with the motel smell and the smell of the unpacked suitcase and the smell of the ice in the bucket until the room had its own complete atmosphere, its own particular version of the night. And gradually, as the unpacking finished and the last things were set down and the suitcase was closed and pushed to the foot of the bed or slid under it out of the way, the room settled. The things that had been in transit all day were now still. The shoes were by the door. The clothes were in the closet. The toiletries were in the bathroom. The ice was in the bucket. Everything had found its place, temporary as that place was, and the room had absorbed these small offerings of domesticity and become, in the quiet way that rooms do, something that felt inhabited, something that felt, in a modest and entirely sufficient way, like shelter. The neon light outside pressed softly through the gap in the curtains. That warm rose and orange glow that had been a landmark from the highway and was now just a gentle presence at the edge of the room. A reminder of the world outside that was not insistent, not demanding, just there, like the sound of the air conditioner, like the low murmur of the television, like the settling of the building around its guests. The long day of driving was behind them now. The road would be there again in the morning, patient and ready, but for now, the bags were down, the shoes were off. The ice was cold in the glass, and the room held everything it needed to hold. There was something about the smell of a roadside diner at supper time that seemed to reach you before you even crossed the parking lot. It came through the warm evening air in layers. The deep, settled smell of a griddle that had been working since morning. The faint sweetness of pie cooling somewhere near a window. Coffee that had been brewing and rebrewing all day long until it had become something almost elemental. Less like a drink and more like the smell of the place itself. You would catch it as you stepped out of the motel room, key tucked into a shirt pocket, the evening air still holding a little of the day's warmth, and something in you would simply relax another degree, the way a knot loosens when you stop pulling against it. The diner across the road was the kind of place that had probably been there for years before the highway got busy, and would likely be there for years after. It sat low and wide, with windows that ran the length of the front wall and let out a long, warm rectangle of yellow light onto the asphalt. A sign above the door spelled out the name in letters that were sometimes neon and sometimes just painted, depending on the diner, depending on the town. But the feeling was always the same. A feeling that this was a place that knew what it was doing, that had fed thousands of people passing through and would feed thousands more, and was entirely unbothered by the scale of that task. The walk across the road was a small pleasure in itself. The gravel or the blacktop or the packed dirt of the parking lot. The sound of your footsteps changing as you moved from one surface to another. The way the neon from both the motel and the diner threw soft competing colors across the ground. A little pink, a little blue. A little of that warm amber that neon does when it has been on for hours and has settled into itself. Moths circled the lights above the diner door with a kind of gentle persistence. And somewhere nearby there were crickets. Always crickets, the steady soft pulse of them filling in the spaces between other sounds, the way a background fills in a painting. You pushed open the door and the world changed in an instant. Though not violently, it was more like stepping from one comfortable room into another. The air inside was warmer and thicker, carrying all those smells much more closely now. And there was noise, but it was the soft noise of a place that was pleasantly full without being crowded. The sound of cutlery against plates, the low murmur of conversations that were not meant to be overheard, the occasional short laugh, the particular sound of a coffee cup being set down on a formica counter. Each of these sounds was small on its own, but together they made something that felt almost like music, or at least like the memory of music. The booths were upholstered in vinyl, usually red or green, sometimes a warm tan. And they were deep and wide enough that you could settle into one and feel genuinely held. The seat would give a little under you with a soft sound, and the table would be cool and smooth under your hands, wiped clean so many times that the formica had a kind of shine that was less like newness and more like the shine of long use, of something that had been cared for. There might be a small jukebox selector mounted on the wall of the booth, a little chrome glass thing with a list of songs behind a curved window, and you could flip through the cards with your thumb if you liked, though you might not bother, because the music coming from the main jukebox in the corner was already doing its quiet work. Something slow and easy, a voice or a steel guitar, floating just above the level of conversation without interrupting it. The menus were laminated and generous, the kind that folded out into several panels and offered more options than you could seriously consider, which was part of the pleasure. There were things you had driven past 100 diners wanting, and now here they all were, listed in a font that was cheerful and a little uneven, beside prices that were modest enough to feel like a small kindness. A bowl of soup to start, perhaps thick and steaming with crackers in a little paper sleeve. A sandwich built with a straightforward confidence. The bread soft, the filling substantial. Everything arranged without fuss or a plate dinner. The kind where the protein sat in the center and the sides spread out around it in small, separate portions, mashed potatoes with a well of butter beginning to melt into them. Green beans that had been cooked long and slow with something savory. A roll wrapped in a paper napkin that you would unfold with a small sense of ceremony. The waitress came with a practiced ease, her uniform neat, her order pad already in hand. And she had the particular skill of making you feel both attended to and unhurried. She might call you Han, or she might not, depending on where you were and what the custom was. But either way, the effect was the same. You felt that you were welcome here, that your presence at this table was a perfectly ordinary and good thing, that there was no reason to be anything other than comfortable. She poured the coffee without being asked if your cup was already on the table, a gesture so smooth and habitual that it felt less like service and more like a small, repeated act of generosity. Families settled into the larger booths with a kind of organized ease, children sliding in along the wall side, parents taking the outside seats with the quiet efficiency of people who had done this many times. A father might study the menu with great seriousness, even though he probably ordered the same thing every time. And a mother might be cutting something into smaller pieces before the plate had even fully landed on the table. And the children might be coloring on paper placemats or simply looking around at the other people with the frank, uncomplicated curiosity of the young. There was something very settled about it, very ordinary in the best sense of that word. At the counter, the stools were occupied by a different kind of traveler. The solo ones, the ones who had been on the road long enough that sitting at a counter felt natural, who ate with a comfortable efficiency and sometimes talked to the cook through the pass-through window, or to the waitress when she paused for a moment between tables. The cook himself was a presence more than a person, visible in glimpses through that window. A hand reaching for a plate, a spatula working against the griddle, the white of a uniform catching the kitchen light. The sounds from the kitchen were their own small symphony. The hiss of something hitting a hot surface, the soft clatter of plates being stacked, the occasional brief exchange of words in a shorthand that had developed over years of working in the same small space. The pie was always worth considering. It sat under a glass dome on the counter. 2 or 3 varieties, the crusts golden and crimped with a care that suggested someone had been making pies for a long time and had never stopped taking it seriously. Apple with cinnamon, perhaps, or cherry with its deep red filling showing at the vents. Or a cream pie of some kind, tall and pale and set with a wavering exactness. You might order a slice with your coffee, or you might save it for the end. And either way it arrived on a small plate with a fork that seemed slightly too large for the task, which was somehow endearing. The light in the diner was warm and even, not the harsh light of a place that wanted you to finish quickly and leave, but the softer light of a place that understood you might want to sit for a while. It fell on the chrome fixtures and made them glow. It caught the steam rising from a coffee cup and made it briefly visible. It lay across the table in a way that made everything on it look solid and good. Outside the long windows, the parking lot and the highway beyond it were doing their evening things. The occasional sweep of headlights, the slow movement of a truck pulling in, the way the neon signs reflected in long streaks on the blacktop when the surface was still a little damp from an afternoon shower that had passed through hours ago. People watched the windows without meaning to. The way people always watch windows when there is movement outside and stillness inside. A car would drift past on the highway, its lights cutting a clean path through the dark, heading somewhere, and you would watch it for a moment and then return to your plate, to your coffee, to the conversation at your table, or the comfortable silence if you were alone. There was no urgency in any of it. The highway would still be there in the morning. The car would still start. The miles would still be covered. Tonight there was just this booth, this plate, this cup, this warm and unhurried room. Dessert, if you had it, arrived with a kind of finality that was not unwelcome. The last cup of coffee, poured perhaps one more time with that same quiet generosity, grew cooler as you sat with it, and you let it because there was no reason to rush. The bill came in a small folder or simply face down on the table, and the numbers on it were modest enough that paying felt like a small, pleasant transaction rather than a reckoning. You left something extra on the table, a little more than was strictly necessary, because the evening had been good and the coffee had been kept full and the booth had held you well. And it seemed right to mark that in some small way. Then the walk back across the road. which felt different now, slower, fuller, the body carrying the pleasant weight of a proper meal. The evening air was a degree or two cooler than it had been on the way over. Or perhaps it only seemed that way because you had been sitting in warmth for an hour. The neon signs were doing their quiet work. The motel sign cycling through its colors with a patience that suggested it had all the time in the world. And the room was there waiting. The key still in your pocket. The door opening onto that particular smell of a motel room that was already beginning to feel familiar. The cool air, the faint trace of the soap from the bathroom. The slight staleness of carpet that was not unpleasant. Just present, just real. The ice in the glass on the nightstand would have melted down to small clear chips by now. The water cold and faintly sweet. And you might drink some of it before doing anything else. Standing in the room in the quiet that was not quite silence. The hum of the air conditioning unit. The far-off sound of the highway. A door somewhere in the motel closing softly. The world settling into its nighttime rhythms. The television might come on for a little while. Its blue-gray light filling the room with the gentle murmur of an evening program. Voices talking about things that did not require your full attention. That you could listen to from a comfortable distance, the way you might listen to rain. The curtains, when you drew them, did not block the light entirely. A thin line of neon still found its way around the edge. A soft pulse of color that was less an intrusion than a reminder that the world outside was still quietly going about its business. That the highway was still there. That tomorrow was already being arranged. But the room was dim enough now, and warm enough in the bed, when you turned back the covers, had that particular quality of a bed in a place you have never slept before. The slight unfamiliarity of the pillow, the different weight of the blanket, the way the mattress received you in a way that was not quite your own mattress at home, but was, in its own way, entirely adequate, entirely fine. The diner across the road was still lit, still warm, still doing its work. Another family settling into a booth. Another solo traveler at the counter. Another slice of pie going out under that warm, even light. It would stay open for hours yet, and then it would close. And in the morning it would open again and begin the whole long, gentle cycle once more. The griddle heating up, the coffee beginning. The smell of it drifting out across the parking lot into the morning air. But that was morning, and morning was a long way off. And there was nothing to do with it tonight. Tonight had been exactly what it needed to be. A plate of food, a warm room. The sound of other people living their ordinary lives nearby. The small and sufficient pleasures of a night off the highway. The body knew it, settling deeper into the unfamiliar bed. The mind releasing its hold on the miles behind and the miles ahead. Finding that quiet place between the two where there was nothing required of it at all. Where it could simply rest and breathe and let the soft neon pulse at the edge of the curtain be the last thing it noticed before everything grew still and gentle and very, very dark. And so the darkness settled, soft and complete over that little room beside the highway. But outside, the world was doing something rather lovely. Something that happened every evening at roughly the same hour. As reliable and unhurried as the tide coming in along a warm shore. The neon was coming on. It did not happen all at once. That was one of the quiet pleasures of it. if you happen to be watching from the right place. A diner stool perhaps, or a car easing slowly into the gravel lot. Or even just a pair of eyes peering through a gap in the curtains of room 7 or room 12. The signs came on the way stars appear on a clear summer evening. One at a time, each one finding its moment. Each one contributing its particular color to the gathering dusk until the whole roadside hummed and glowed like something out of a gentle dream. The motel sign itself was usually among the first. The owner, or sometimes a teenage son pressed into early evening duty, would flip the switch somewhere around 5 or half past, depending on the season, depending on the sky. In summer, the light was still golden and strong enough that the neon seemed almost modest at first, a pale suggestion of color against the blue. But as the minutes passed and the sun continued its long, unhurried descent behind whatever hills or flat fields lay to the west, the sign began to assert itself more confidently. The pink deepened, the blue sharpened. The word vacancy, when it was lit, glowed with a particular warmth, like a lamp in a window, like an invitation written in light. Imagine standing in the parking lot just as that transition happened. The air would still carry the warmth of the day. That particular late afternoon heat that rises from asphalt and concrete and holds itself close to the ground. There might be the smell of cut grass from wherever someone had been mowing earlier, or the faint, sweet exhaust of a car that had just pulled through, or the dry mineral scent of dust settling after a long afternoon of being disturbed by passing traffic. And above you, the sign would be doing it slow. Beautiful work warming up, the gas inside the glass tubes finding its rhythm. The color becoming more itself with every passing minute. Nylon is a patient thing. The tubes need a moment to reach their full expression. And there is something in that gradual brightening that feels almost like a living thing waking up. Stretching, finding its voice. The technology behind it was not especially new by the 1950s. Neon signs had been glowing above American streets since the 1920s, and the sight of them had long since become woven into the fabric of everyday life. But familiarity had not made them ordinary. If anything, the years had deepened the affection people felt for them. The way you might feel a deeper fondness for an old song the more times you have heard it. The colors that motel signs favored had a logic to them, a kind of roadside poetry. Pink and turquoise appeared together with remarkable frequency, a pairing that seems almost inevitable in retrospect. The two colors complementing each other the way the desert complements the sky. Red was common, a warm arterial red that read clearly from a distance, even in full daylight, and burned with particular richness after dark. Green appeared in all its variations, from the deep forest tones of some older signs to the bright electric greens that seemed almost to vibrate against the night. Blue, cool and steady, suggested reliability. Cleanliness, the particular trustworthiness that travelers needed most when they were far from home and tired down to their bones. The men and women who designed these signs worked in a tradition that was part craft, part art and part something harder to name. An instinct for what would catch the eye and hold it. What would make a driver ease off the accelerator and think, yes, here, this is the place. The glass tubes were bent by hand over open flames, the bending requiring years of practice to do well. The glass having its own opinions about how it wished to move, and the skilled craftsman learning to work with those opinions rather than against them. The finished tubes were then filled with gas. neon for the reds and oranges, argon mixed with mercury for the blues and greens, and sealed, and when the current passed through them, they gave off their particular light. Steady and soft, and somehow both cool and warm at once. Along a stretch of highway in, say, Central California or the Texas Panhandle or the long flat reaches of Illinois, the coming of evening would set off a kind of chain reaction among the signs. A filling station's red and white would flicker to life. Then a diner's sign, perhaps one spelling out the owner's name in a cheerful cursive, would join it. The motor court a quarter mile further on would add its contribution. And then the drive-in theater marquee beyond that. And by the time full dark had arrived, the roadside had become a kind of illuminated corridor, a gentle river of colored light guiding travelers through the night. From inside a moving car. This was one of the particular pleasures of highway travel in that era. The family in the station wagon, the salesman and his company sedan, the young couple on their honeymoon. All of them had experienced that moment when the road ahead began to glow, when the darkness on either side of the highway was punctuated by color, when the signs reflected off the hood of the car and washed briefly through the windshield in passing waves of pink and blue and red. Children pressed their faces to the glass. Adults felt something loosen in their chests, some small release of the day's accumulated tension. The motel signs were designed to be seen from a distance, which meant they were often large, often tall, raised on poles that lifted them above the roof lines and the trees so that they could speak to approaching travelers while there was still time to slow down. To signal to turn, the taller signs sometimes had arrows, long pointing neon arrows that swept or blinked in a particular direction, drawing the eye and then the car toward the entrance. There was a kind of generosity in this, a genuine desire to help the weary traveler find the way. And the arrows felt less like advertising than like a friendly arm extended, pointing, saying, "Come this way. We have a room, we have ice. We have a bed where you can rest." Some signs incorporated animation, or what passed for animation in neon. The illusion of movement created by switching tubes on and off in sequence, so that a figure appeared to walk, or a car appeared to drive, or a swimming pool appeared to ripple. These were the more ambitious productions, the signs that had required the most planning and the most tubes and the most careful electrical work. And they were regarded with a particular affection by travelers who encountered them. There was something almost theatrical about them, something that belonged to the same family of feeling as a puppet show or a music box, a small contained performance offered freely to anyone who happened to be passing. The ice machine, that other great source of light and sound in the motel night, sat in its little alcove or its dedicated room and contributed its own modest glow to the scene. A bare bulb, usually, or a fluorescent tube that cast a cool and practical light over the machine's metal surfaces. Not beautiful in the way the neon was beautiful, but honest, functional, reassuring in its own way. The light said, "Here is a thing that works. Here is a convenience laid on for your comfort. Here is evidence that someone thought about what you might need in the night." The hum of the machine's compressor was part of the ambient music of the motel, as familiar and unthreatening as the sound of a refrigerator in a kitchen at home. As the evening deepened, the guests who had already checked in began to emerge from their rooms in ones and twos. A couple might walk to the ice machine together, the woman holding the plastic bucket, the man carrying a small paper bag from a drugstore. They would exchange a quiet word with another guest doing the same errand. Strangers united by the small democracy of the motel night. Equally far from home, equally in need of ice. A child in pajamas might appear briefly in a doorway, called back inside by a parent's voice before venturing more than a step or two into the evening air. A man in a short-sleeved shirt might sit in one of the aluminum chairs outside his room and smoke a cigarette in the companionable company of the neon sign's reflection in the puddle left by the afternoon's brief rain. The office, too, had its evening character. The proprietor or the night clerk would be settling in for the long, quiet hours. The reservation book open on the desk. The key hooks on the wall behind showing which rooms were occupied and which remained available. A small television might be on in the back room. Its sound turned low, the blue light of it flickering under the door. A radio might be playing something soft. A late evening program, perhaps, the kind with a host who spoke in unhurried tones about nothing in particular, filling the air with the comfortable sound of a human voice. The smell of coffee, brewed earlier in the day and kept warm, hung in the air with the smell of the desk's wood and the faint chemical sweetness of the mimeographed registration forms. Outside, the highway continued its work. Trucks passed in the night, their headlights sweeping across the motel's facade. Their engines a low sustained note that rose and fell and then was gone. Absorbed into the distance, passenger cars moved more quietly, their taillights receding into the dark like small red stars. Now and then a car would slow, signal turn into the lot, the gravel announcing its arrival with that particular sound. Those small stones shifting and crunching under the weight of rubber tires. A sound that meant another traveler had found the place, had seen the sign and followed its invitation. The sign itself, by this hour, was fully itself. Whatever tentativeness it had shown in the early evening was long gone. It burned with the confidence of something that knew its purpose and was fulfilling it without effort or strain. The pink of it lay across the parking lot in long, soft pools, interrupted by the shadows of the cars parked there, and the blue of the vacancy letters reflected in the windshields and the chrome and the small dark windows of the rooms where people were already sleeping. There was a very gentle buzzing that you could hear if you stood close enough. The electrical voice of the gas inside the glass, barely audible above the ambient sounds of the evening, but present. Continuous, the sign's own quiet breath. It is a sound that belongs entirely to that era, to those years when neon was at its fullest flowering along the American roadside, before other technologies came along to do the same work in different ways. The people who heard it then may not have thought of it as anything special, any more than we pause to notice the particular sound of our own ordinary evenings. But it was special in the way that all ordinary things are special when you give them a moment's attention, when you slow down enough to hear what is actually there. The travelers in their rooms heard it, or something like it, in the last moments before sleep found them. A soft electrical murmur at the edge of awareness, accompanied by that faint colored light at the curtain's edge. The pink or the blue or the red, depending on which side of the building their room was on. Which sign was nearest, it was not a disturbing sound or a disturbing light. It was, if anything, the opposite. A reminder that the world outside was continuing its gentle business. That the highway was still there. That the sign was still doing its faithful work. That they were held in a place that knew they were there. and was tending to them in its modest way. The sign would burn all night. That was one of the things about neon. One of its quiet virtues. It was content to go on indefinitely, hour after hour without complaint or diminishment. The same steady glow at 2 in the morning that it had offered at 7 in the evening. The travelers would sleep and the sign would burn. The highway would quiet and the sign would burn. The ice machine would cycle through its patient work and the sign would burn. And if someone happened to be awake in the small hours, a light sleeper or someone whose mind had come briefly to the surface of sleep and then was finding its way back down, they might see that familiar color at the curtain's edge and feel, without quite knowing why, a sense of comfort, of being somewhere known, of being held in the warm and patient light of a sign that had no other purpose than to say, simply and continuously, we are here. You are here, all is well. Rest now. And the night would continue, unhurried and complete, the sign burning its steady colors into the dark. The travelers breathing slowly in their rooms. The highway dreaming of morning. The whole quiet world of the roadside motel doing what it had been built to do. Offering shelter and rest to people in motion. Giving them a place to stop. A place to be still. A place where the particular sweetness of a night away from home could settle over them like something soft and warm and entirely their own. And in that sweetness, in that particular quiet that belonged only to travelers resting between one place and another, there was almost always, sooner or later, the soft gray glow beginning to fill the corner of the room. The television set in a 1950s motel room was not a subtle thing, and yet somehow it managed to feel like a comfort rather than an intrusion. It sat on its own little stand, or sometimes on the dresser, a substantial piece of furniture in its own right, with a rounded screen the color of old pewter when it was dark and a cabinet of pale wood or painted metal surrounding it on all sides. The knobs were large and satisfying to turn, with a certain resistance to them, a gentle click as they moved from one position to the next, and the whole apparatus had a solidity about it, a weight and presence that made it feel like something that had earned its place in the room. You did not ignore a television set in 1950s America. You acknowledged it the way you might acknowledge a friendly dog settled near the hearth. When you switched it on, there was a moment of waiting. The set needed time to warm itself, the way a cast iron pan needs time to come to temperature. And in that brief interval, the screen would remain dark while a faint hum built quietly inside the cabinet. And then, gradually, as though the picture were assembling itself from some distant place and traveling a very long way to reach you, the image would resolve itself out of a soft gray fog. There was something almost ceremonial about that moment. The waiting, the gradual brightening, the way the room changed character once the screen came fully alive with its flickering blue-white light. In the middle of the evening, the channels available in most American cities and towns were still relatively few. And in smaller places along the highway, there might be only 1 or 2 signals strong enough to come in clearly. The antenna on the roof of the motel, or sometimes a small set of rabbit ears perched on top of the television itself, did its best to pull in whatever was traveling through the air that night. And sometimes the picture would hold steady and clear, and sometimes it would drift into a soft fuzz of static, and you would get up and adjust the ears very gently, turning them a few degrees this way and then a few degrees that. until the image settled again into something watchable. There was a patience required, and a kind of tenderness in the handling of those thin metal rods, as though you were coaxing something shy and easily startled. What was on the television in those years had a particular texture to it, a warmth and a smallness of scale that suited the motel room perfectly. Variety programs with their live audiences and their sense of something happening right now, somewhere not too far away. Westerns with their wide skies and their unhurried pacing. Men on horseback moving through landscapes that looked, even on a small screen, genuinely vast. Situation comedies set in living rooms, not entirely unlike the rooms people had left behind at home. Full of familiar furniture and familiar small troubles that resolved themselves tidily within the half hour. There was a domestic quality to all of it, a sense that the television was inviting you to feel at home even when you were not at home. And in the context of a motel room, that invitation had a particular gentleness to it. The sound of the television in those years was a specific kind of sound. Slightly tinny, slightly compressed, coming from a small speaker set into the cabinet. And it filled the room without overwhelming it. You could hear it clearly from the bed, where most people eventually ended up, propped against the pillows with their shoes off and the bedspread pulled loosely over their legs. And the sound would mix with the other sounds of the evening. The distant hum of the ice machine down the corridor. The occasional sweep of headlights across the curtains as a car pulled into the lot. The faint sound of someone else's door opening and closing somewhere along the row of rooms. All of it together created a kind of layered quiet, a busyness that was really a form of stillness. The children, if there were children, were often the most immediately drawn to the set. In many households in those years, television was still something of a recent arrival, still carrying a faint sense of occasion about it. And a motel room with its own television felt like a small luxury, a thing to be appreciated. A child lying on the foot of the bed with their chin in their hands, watching the screen with the total absorption that children bring to things they find genuinely wonderful, was a common enough sight in those rooms. The parents might be doing other things, unpacking a few items from the suitcase, washing their faces at the sink. But the soft light from the screen would reach all the way across the room and touch everything in it with its particular blue-gray color. And the whole room would feel held together by that light. And then there were the postcards. Most 1950s motels kept a small supply of them at the front desk, or sometimes in a little wire rack on the dresser alongside the room service menu and the local restaurant guide. They were printed on stiff cardstock with a slight gloss to them, and the image on the front was almost always a photograph of the motel itself, taken on a bright day with the neon sign lit and the parking lot pleasantly full, and the sky a shade of blue that seemed slightly more blue than any actual sky you had ever seen. The color printing of those years had a quality to it that was rich and saturated and just a little bit idealized, so that the motel in the photograph always looked slightly more glamorous than the motel you were actually staying in, and yet not so different that you couldn't recognize it, couldn't find the particular shape of the office roof or the distinctive color of the doors in the image before you. There was a ritual to the writing of a postcard that felt entirely suited to the mood of a night in a motel. You would find a pen, perhaps the one in your jacket pocket, or perhaps the one left thoughtfully on the little desk near the window. And you would sit down with the card and think for a moment about who you were writing to. A parent perhaps, or a neighbor watching the house, or a friend who had asked to hear how the trip was going. The space on the back of the card was small, divided between the message and the address. And that smallness was actually a relief, because it meant you did not need to say very much. You needed only to say that you had arrived here, that the room was comfortable, that the weather had been fine, that you expected to reach your destination by such and such a day. A few lines written in the slightly careful hand that people used when they knew the writing would be read by someone who mattered to them. Imagine the feel of that card in your hand, the slight stiffness of it, the smooth surface of the image on one side and the faint roughness of the card stock on the other where you rested your pen. The pen itself moving slowly across the lines. The small effort of choosing words that were warm without being elaborate. That communicated something true without requiring very much. There was an art to the postcard, a compression, and people who traveled regularly became quite good at it, at finding the few words that carried the most meaning in the smallest space. The stamp would need to be found, or purchased from the machine near the front desk, and then the card would be left on the dresser to be mailed in the morning, or perhaps slipped into the slot of the mailbox just outside the motel office on the way to the car. And then it would begin its own journey, traveling by truck and by plane and by the hands of postal workers in cities and towns all along the route, moving toward the person who would open the mailbox in a day or two and find it there among the bills and the circulars. This small bright rectangle with its idealized image of a motel somewhere along a highway. And on the other side, a few lines of familiar handwriting saying only that everything was fine, that the road had been good, that they were thinking of you. There is something in that exchange, in the writing and the sending and the eventual receiving, that speaks very quietly to something deep in the way people have always wanted to stay connected to one another even when distance separates them. The postcard did not pretend to be a letter. It did not try to contain everything. It said only, "I am here, and I am thinking of you, and the world is large and interesting, and I am moving through it, and you are not forgotten." That was enough, that was, in fact, quite a lot. Back in the room, the television would continue its soft murmur. By 9 or 10 o'clock, the variety programs would give way to dramas, or to the late local news, which in those years had a particular unhurried quality. A man at a desk reading the day's events in a measured voice that seemed designed to reassure rather than alarm, to suggest that the world was proceeding in an orderly fashion and that tomorrow would arrive in due course and would probably be manageable. The weather forecast would come, with its maps and its pointer and its prediction of temperatures and precipitation delivered with a kind of cheerful practicality. And there was something comforting about hearing the weather for places you were passing through, about understanding something of the landscape you were moving across in terms of its temperatures and its winds and its likelihood of rain. The light in the room by this hour would have settled into a comfortable arrangement, the lamp on the nightstand casting its warm circle, the television adding its cooler, more restless light from across the room, the curtains drawn against the dark outside, but perhaps not quite meeting in the middle, so that a thin line of neon from the sign outside would fall across the floor. A stripe of color, rose or amber, or the particular blue-green of certain neon tubes, shifting very slightly as the sign cycled through its sequence. That stripe of colored light on the carpet had a quality of something dreamed rather than seen. Something that belonged to the particular atmosphere of the motel night rather than to ordinary life. The ice bucket might have been fetched earlier in the evening. And if there were drinks, they would be sitting on the nightstand or on the dresser. The ice long since melted into cool water, the glass leaving a small ring on the surface of the furniture that the housekeeper would wipe away in the morning without a thought. Small evidence of an evening's ease, of someone having sat in this room and rested and watched television and written a postcard and let the hours pass without demanding very much of them. There was, in all of this, a quality of permission. The motel room gave you permission to do very little. To watch television without feeling that you should be doing something more productive. To write a short note to someone you loved and feel that you had done something kind and sufficient. To lie on the bed with your shoes off and let the sounds of the television and the distant highway and the ice machine down the hall wash over you without requiring anything in return. At home, there was always something more that could be done. Some small task waiting at the edge of your attention. Here, the room itself seemed to say that you had done enough for the day, that the driving was finished, that the miles were behind you, and that what remained of the evening was yours to spend exactly as gently as you wished. The television, by the late hours, would sometimes begin to drift toward the end of its broadcast day. In those years, stations did not run through the night, and eventually the programming would conclude with a sign-off. Often a brief word from the announcer, and then the national anthem played over a still image of the flag. And then the screen would resolve into a pattern of static, a soft hissing field of gray and white that was called simply snow, and that had a sound to it like rain falling very lightly on leaves somewhere far away. Some people fell asleep to that sound. It was not an unpleasant thing to fall asleep to. Others would reach over and turn the set off before that happened. And then the room would be suddenly and completely dark, except for the stripe of neon on the floor and the faint luminescence of the numbers on the clock radio on the nightstand. And the quiet would deepen into something very close to silence, broken only by the sounds that had been there all along beneath the television's voice. The hum of the highway, the occasional door, the soft mechanical cycling of the ice machine going about its patient work in the dark corridor outside. The postcards would sit on the dresser waiting for morning, their glossy images facing upward, the handwriting on the back already dry, the words already fixed and ready to travel. Tomorrow they would begin their journey toward the people they were meant for, and the people who had written them would begin their own journey down the highway, and the room would be made up fresh and ready for whoever came next. But that was tomorrow. Tonight, the room held its travelers gently, and the neon stripe moved slowly across the floor like the hand of a clock, measuring out the last soft hours of the evening. And somewhere outside, the highway continued its long, patient conversation with the dark, carrying other travelers toward other rooms, other televisions warming in other corners, other postcards waiting to be written in the particular quiet of a night spent pleasantly in between. And so the motel settled into itself, the way a house settles when the last lamp is turned down and the last voice goes quiet, and all the small sounds that were always there beneath the conversation begin to rise, gently like the surface of a pond finding its stillness after a stone has passed through it and the ripples have moved to the shore and dissolved. It was midnight, or close enough to midnight that the difference hardly mattered. The neon sign out front still burned, because neon signs in those years burned all through the night, patient and faithful as lighthouses, sending their particular color out into the dark whether anyone was watching or not. If you had been standing in the parking lot just then, in the warm summer air that still held a little of the day's heat in it, you would have seen that sign reflected in the hoods of the cars parked in their neat row, each one a soft duplicate of the original, a blurred version in chrome and lacquer, the red or the blue or the amber color lying there quietly on the curved metal like something resting. The cars themselves were enormous by any later standard, long and low and shaped with a kind of optimism that belonged entirely to that decade, as though the people who designed them believed that the future would be generous and wide, that there would always be enough road, always enough horizon to move toward. They sat in the parking lot now with their engines cooling, ticking softly in the dark, the metal contracting as the temperature dropped a few degrees. And that sound, that quiet, irregular ticking, was one of the sounds of midnight at a motel in the 1950s, as ordinary and as comforting as the sound of a clock on a mantelpiece. The highway was just beyond the low hedge at the edge of the property, or just beyond the gravel shoulder, or just beyond the painted wooden fence, depending on which motel you were imagining. And at this hour, the highway had a different quality than it had in the afternoon, when the traffic was a continuous presence, a river of sound that you stopped noticing after a while the way you stop noticing the sound of a refrigerator running. Now at midnight, the cars came one at a time, or in small clusters with long silences between them, and each one announced itself from a distance, a growing brightness in the darkness, headlights sweeping across the ceiling of a room where someone was almost asleep. And then the sound, that particular sound of a car moving at highway speed, a sustained rush of air and engine that arrived and then faded, faded until it was gone entirely and the silence came back, a little deeper than before, the way silence always seems a little deeper after a sound has moved through it. Imagine lying in one of those beds, in one of those rooms, with the window open just an inch or two because the night air was pleasant and the room had been a little close when you first arrived. The curtains, heavy ones in a pattern of overlapping diamonds, or perhaps a muted floral, would shift very slightly when a truck passed on the highway, a slow breath of warm air moving through the gap, carrying with it the faint smell of the road, of hot asphalt that had been cooling for hours, of dust and the particular mineral smell of the night air in whatever state you happened to be crossing. And then the curtains would settle again, and the room would be still, and the sound of the highway would fade back into its long quiet, and you would feel the pillow beneath your head, cool on one side where you had not yet turned to it, and the sheet which was crisp and smelled of laundry soap, a clean institutional smell that was not unpleasant. That was in fact part of the whole experience. The smell of a night spent somewhere that was not home, but was not unwelcoming either. The ice machine was somewhere down the walkway, perhaps 3 or 4 doors along, and every so often it would run through its cycle. A mechanical sound, a grinding and a clunking, and then a cascade of ice falling into the bin. And then silence again. In the daytime, you would not have noticed it particularly. But at midnight, it had a kind of presence, a small event in the quiet. And then it was over and the night resumed. Someone earlier in the evening had filled a plastic bucket with ice and carried it back to their room, and the ice was still there on the dresser now. Mostly melted, the bucket sweating quietly onto the paper doily the motel had placed there for exactly that purpose. A small thoughtfulness, a paper circle with a scalloped edge that had absorbed the cold water and gone a little translucent. The vending machine alcove, if there was one, threw a small rectangle of light onto the walkway outside. A yellowish glow that did not reach far, but was enough to see by if you needed to find your way to the ice or to the office. The machine itself held rows of things in their neat coils. Candy bars and crackers and small packages of peanuts. All of them waiting in their particular positions. Patient inventory. A moth moved around the light above the machine in slow circles, drawn to it in that unhurried way moths have, as though they are not in any hurry to arrive anywhere, as though the circling itself is the purpose. In the office, the night clerk was awake, or mostly awake, sitting behind the counter with a magazine or a paperback novel, or perhaps just the quiet company of the radio playing low. A late-night program with a host who spoke in a measured, unhurried voice, the kind of voice that was made for late nights, that understood the particular mood of the small hours, when the world had contracted to a comfortable size and there was nothing that needed doing that could not wait until morning. The office smelled of coffee, of the pot that had been made hours ago and was now thick and strong on the burner, and of the particular combination of things that all motel offices smelled of in those years. A little of carpet, a little of the paper of registration cards, a little of whatever the clerk had eaten for dinner, something from a bag or a wrapper, something simple and adequate. The key rack on the wall behind the counter held its remaining keys on their heavy diamond-shaped fobs. The ones for the rooms that were occupied turned in their hooks at a slightly different angle. A small visual record of the night's business. The register on the desk held the names of the guests in their rooms, written in the careful handwriting of whoever had been at the desk when they arrived. The names of people who were now sleeping, or nearly sleeping, or lying in the particular pleasant suspension between waking and sleep, where thoughts move slowly and without urgency, where the mind lets go of its daytime grip on things and allows itself to drift. Out on the highway, a long-haul truck moved through the darkness, its running lights strung along its length like a traveling constellation, red and amber and white, and the driver up in the cab was listening to the radio too. The same late-night frequency, perhaps. The same measured voice, and the truck moved through the pool of light thrown by the motel sign, and then out the other side and away. Its lights diminishing in the rear-view mirror of anyone who might have been watching, growing smaller and more distant until they were just a suggestion of light at the edge of the visible world. And then nothing. The swimming pool, if the motel had one, was still and dark at this hour, the water holding the reflection of whatever stars were visible. A few scattered lights in the deep blue-black of the sky, and the surface of the water moved only very slightly. A slow breathing caused by nothing in particular. Just the night air, just the small movements of the world. The deck chairs were folded and stacked or left open in their positions from the afternoon, and the towels that guests had draped over them had been collected by housekeeping before dark. So the chairs sat empty and a little formal, waiting for the morning. There was a family in one of the rooms, a mother and a father and 2 children who had been asleep for hours. The children in one of the double beds and the parents in the other. And the room was full of the soft sound of their breathing. 4 people in the particular unconsciousness of the deeply tired. The children especially, who had been in the car all day and had eaten dinner at a diner somewhere around 7 o'clock. Hamburgers and milkshakes, the milkshakes coming in tall metal cups with more in them than would fit in the glass. A small abundance, and who had been asleep almost before the room was dark. The father had left his shoes by the door, side by side the way his own father had always left his shoes. And the mother had set the small travel clock on the nightstand, wound and set for 7, and the room was as settled as any room can be. Everything in its place, the night doing its quiet work. In another room, a salesman was sleeping with the television still on. The sound turned very low. The picture a soft blue and gray light that moved across the ceiling in slow patterns. The late movie playing out its story to no one in particular. The actors moving through their scenes in the dark of the room, while the man in the bed breathed slowly and did not stir. His sample case was open on the luggage rack, its contents in their neat arrangement, and his jacket hung on the back of the chair, and his hat was on the dresser, and everything about the room said that he had been here many times before, in rooms very much like this one, that he had a practiced way of settling in, a routine that had smoothed itself out over many miles and many nights, and that he was perfectly comfortable, perfectly at ease in this temporary place. The couple in the end room had come back from dinner later than most, and they were still awake, but quietly so, talking in low voices about nothing in particular. About the drive tomorrow, about whether they should stop for breakfast early or wait until they were further along. About something one of them had seen in a shop window in the last town. A small observation, the kind of thing that only gets said in the comfortable privacy of a room at the end of the day, when the formality of the world has dropped away and there is nothing required of you but to be present. Their voices were very soft, almost indistinguishable from the general murmur of the night, and they would be asleep soon, the conversation winding down of its own accord, the sentences getting shorter, the pauses between them getting longer, until the pauses became the whole of it and the talking simply stopped. The neon sign went on burning. It would burn until morning, until the sky behind it began to lighten and the color of the neon became less vivid against the growing blue of early dawn. And then it would still be burning when the first guests came out in their traveling clothes, squinting a little in the early light, carrying their bags to their cars, and the night clerk would have been replaced by the morning clerk, and the coffee in the office would be fresh, and the day would be beginning again in its ordinary way. But that was still hours away. For now, the night was complete in itself. The motel was complete in itself. This small community of travelers at rest, each in their room, each in their particular version of the same experience. The same beds, the same curtains, the same sound of the highway coming and going, the same ice machine down the walkway, the same neon light finding its way through the gap at the edge of the curtains and lying across the floor in a thin line of color. There was something deeply ordinary about all of it, and the ordinary was its own kind of comfort, a reminder that the world was a place where such things existed, where you could pull off the highway and find a room and a bed and a place to set your shoes and hang your jacket, where the night would pass safely and the morning would come reliably, and where the distance between where you had been and where you were going was just a number of miles, manageable, finite, already partly done. The highway hum continued, low and constant beneath everything, the sound of the country moving through its own night. trucks and cars and the occasional bus, all of them threading through the darkness on their various errands, their headlights sweeping the road ahead of them, their taillights fading into the distance. And the motel received this sound and held it. The way a valley holds the sound of water. The way a room holds the warmth of a fire long after the fire has gone low. And the sound became part of the texture of the night, part of what it meant to sleep in this particular place. In this particular decade, when the roads were still new enough to feel like possibility, and the distances were still wide enough to feel like freedom. And a night in a motel was a small pleasure. A simple one, but real and warm and entirely sufficient. And somewhere in the distance, another set of headlights was already turning off the highway, already following the gentle curve of the entrance, already finding its way toward the soft glow of the office window. Another traveler arriving at the end of their day, looking for exactly what was here. Exactly this quiet, exactly this rest. And the night clerk was already reaching for a registration card. And the key rack was waiting with its remaining keys. And the rooms were ready, as they always were, warm and still and welcoming in the dark. And so the night would pass, as all nights do, quietly and without ceremony. The hours moving through the motel the way a slow river moves through a meadow. Unhurried, barely noticeable, carrying everything gently forward toward the morning. Somewhere around 4 o'clock, the world outside the motel windows would grow very still. The neon sign out front, that faithful pink and turquoise glow that had guided so many tired travelers off the highway, would hum its low electrical hum into the silence, casting its soft color across the asphalt of the parking lot, where the cars sat cool and dark and patient, their chrome just barely catching the light, like sleeping animals breathing slowly in the dark. The ice machine near the vending alcove would settle into a long, quiet pause between its cycles. And for a little while, the whole place would feel suspended, held gently between the last of the night and the first pale suggestion of the day. Inside the rooms, the travelers slept. Beneath the Channel bedspreads, those soft, tufted spreads in cream and sage and dusty rose that the housekeeping staff had smoothed so carefully the afternoon before. The guests lay still, their shoes lined up by the door, their road maps folded on the nightstand, their small suitcases resting on the luggage racks with their latches undone, ready for the morning packing that would come. The window unit air conditioner breathed its steady, low breath, and the curtains, those thick-drawn curtains that kept the parking lot light from coming in too sharply, moved just slightly in the current of cool air, a slow and gentle motion, like something dreaming. The office, too, was quiet at this hour. The night clerk, if there was one, might be sitting in the back room with a cup of coffee gone lukewarm, reading a paperback novel with a cracked spine, the kind of book bought at a drugstore counter somewhere back along the road. The small lamp on the desk made a warm pool of yellow light. The registration cards from the evening's arrivals were tucked neatly into their slots. The adding machine sat still on the counter. Outside the office window, the highway was nearly empty. Just the occasional sweep of headlights passing through without stopping. Travelers bound for somewhere further on, their tail lights dissolving into the dark. And then, almost imperceptibly, the quality of the darkness would begin to change. It would not happen all at once. It never does. It would begin as a kind of softening at the very edge of the sky. Somewhere off to the east, a faint loosening of the deep blue-black into something slightly lighter. Slightly warmer, the way a piece of dark fabric looks when you hold it up near a window and the light begins to come through the weave of it. The stars would still be there, but they would seem somehow less insistent, less sharp, as though they were beginning to rest after their long night's work. By 5 o'clock, the birds would have noticed. They always noticed before anyone else. Somewhere in the scrubby trees at the edge of the motel property, or in the telephone wires strung along the highway, a single bird would begin. Just a few notes, tentative and clear. And then another would answer from somewhere further off. And gradually the morning would begin to fill with that soft, scattered conversation that has been happening at dawn since long before there were motels or highways or neon signs or any of the things we build to mark our passing through the world. Inside the rooms, the first stirrings. Someone would wake before their alarm. That particular early waking that happens when you are sleeping somewhere unfamiliar and some part of you never quite lets go of the awareness of where you are. They would lie still for a moment, looking up at the ceiling, at the faint pattern of light coming through the gap in the curtains. And they would remember the motel, the highway, the trip, the day ahead. There would be something almost pleasant about that moment of remembering, that small quiet inventory of where you were and where you were going. Then the gentle click of a bedside lamp, the soft rustle of sheets, the sound of someone moving carefully so as not to wake a sleeping spouse or child. In the bathrooms, the morning rituals would begin. The small wrapped bars of soap, white and smooth and smelling faintly of something clean and simple. A scent that was neither flowery nor sharp, just the plain honest smell of soap, would be unwrapped and used for the first time, leaving their paper wrappers on the edge of the sink. The water would run and the mirror would begin to fog slightly at the edges, and someone would draw a hand across it to clear a space, and look at their own face in the soft early light. That familiar face looking back from an unfamiliar mirror in an unfamiliar room. And there would be something quietly interesting about that. Something that made the ordinary act of washing your face feel just slightly different than it did at home. The coffee percolator, if the room had one, would begin its work. There is a particular sound a percolator makes. A gentle rhythmic bubbling, almost conversational. And a smell that fills a small room very quickly and very warmly. The smell of coffee brewing on a cool morning, which is one of the more reliable small comforts the world has to offer. Imagine that smell drifting through the room while the curtains still held back most of the morning light, while the bedspread was still rumpled and warm from the night, while outside the parking lot was just beginning to show the first gray-blue light of the coming day. By 6 o'clock, the motel would be waking in earnest. Doors would begin to open and close, not loudly, but with that particular sound of motel doors. A solid, slightly hollow sound. The click of the latch. The soft rush of outside air coming in for a moment before the door swung shut again. Footsteps on the concrete walkway outside. Unhurried, someone stepping out to look at the morning, to check the sky, to breathe the cool air that still carried the night's chill in it. The highway would be coming back to life too. The first trucks of the day moving through. Their engines a low, distant rumble that was somehow reassuring rather than intrusive. The sound of the world going about its business. Steady and familiar. The office would open fully. The night clerk replaced by the morning person, or perhaps the owner himself, who might have lived in a small apartment at the back of the property and who would come through the connecting door with his own cup of coffee, his hair neatly combed, ready for the day. He would check the register, look over the list of rooms, note who was checking out and who might be staying another night. The adding machine would come to life. The little rack of room keys would show the pattern of the night's occupancy. Some hooks empty where guests had gone to bed with their keys. Some still holding their heavy diamond-shaped fobs. Waiting. The checkout itself was a simple thing. A family would come to the office with their bags already loaded into the car. The children a little sleepy still. The father carrying the room key in his hand. There would be a brief exchange at the counter. A receipt written out by hand in duplicate on a carbon form. The numbers added up the room rate. Perhaps a long-distance telephone call charged to the room. Perhaps a few cents for something from the vending machine noted in the ledger. The receipt would be torn carefully along its perforated edge and handed across the counter. And the key would be placed on the desk. And that would be that. A night stay concluded, a small transaction. Warm and ordinary, the kind that happened 1,000 times a day at motels all across the country. Each one unremarkable and each one, in its own small way, a little complete story of its own. The housekeeping staff would arrive not long after, parking their own cars at the far end of the lot, coming through the side entrance with their carts already stocked. Clean linens folded in neat stacks, fresh towels, new wrapped bars of soap, small replacement bottles of things. They would begin at the rooms that had already been vacated, moving through them with a practiced efficiency that was also, in its way, a kind of care. Stripping the beds and remaking them, pulling the sheets tight and smooth, folding the top sheet back just so, replacing the towels on the rack, setting the fresh soap in the dish, wiping down the sink and the mirror until it was clear and bright again, running the vacuum over the carpet, that low roaring hum moving back and forth across the room, checking the closet, the drawers, beneath the bed for anything left behind, a forgotten sock, a paperback novel, a child's small toy, a pair of sunglasses. These things happened more often than you might expect. People, tired and glad to be moving again in the morning, would leave small pieces of themselves behind without meaning to. Outside, the morning light was fully established now. A clean golden light that came in low and long across the parking lot, catching the chrome of the cars and making it flash, laying warm stripes across the concrete of the walkway, filling the swimming pool if the motel had one, with a shimmering brightness that made the water look very inviting, even though it was still too early and too cool for swimming. The neon sign, which had glowed so faithfully through the night, would look different in the daylight, its colors less vivid, its tubes visible now as the simple glass and gas that they were. The whole structure of it plain and a little ordinary in the morning sun. But it was still there, still part of the place, still the thing that travelers would look for when they came off the highway in the evening. Still the beacon it had always been. The diner or coffee shop attached to the motel, if there was one, would be at its busiest now. The smell of bacon and toast and coffee would be drifting out through the screen door. and inside the booths would be filling with travelers in various stages of their mornings. Some still a little rumpled and quiet, nursing their first cup of coffee, and some already bright and ready, studying their maps, planning the day's route, talking about how many miles they hoped to cover before stopping for lunch. The waitress, in her uniform dress and her practical shoes, would be moving among the tables with practiced ease, pouring coffee without being asked, setting down plates of eggs and toast and small glasses of orange juice, remembering who had ordered what without writing it down. The sound of the place, the clink of cups, the murmur of conversation, the occasional soft bell of the kitchen order window, was a warm and comfortable sound, the sound of a place doing what it was made to do. And then, one by one, the cars would leave, a family would back out of their parking space, the father checking his mirrors carefully, the car loaded with everything they had brought, the suitcases in the trunk, the pillows and blankets the children had asked to bring from home, the paper bag of snacks for the road, the thermos of coffee filled at the diner. They would pull out onto the service road, and then onto the highway, and within a few moments they would be part of the flow of traffic, moving south or west or north or east, toward whatever it was they were going toward, carrying the night's rest with them like something they had packed without thinking about it, something that would serve them well through the long day ahead. The motel would settle back into its daytime quiet. A few cars might still be in the lot, guests who had paid for a late checkout or who were simply taking their time, sitting on the little chairs outside their doors in the morning sun, reading a newspaper bought from the machine by the office, drinking coffee from paper cups. The housekeeping carts would move slowly along the walkway. The ice machine would begin its afternoon cycle. The office would receive its occasional visitor, a traveler stopping to ask about rates, a delivery of something, a telephone call from someone wanting to book a room for the coming night. The key rack on the office wall would gradually fill again as the morning checkouts were completed. Each key returned to its hook, each room made ready by midday. The motel would be poised between one night and the next, all its rooms clean and quiet and waiting, its parking lot mostly empty, its sign dark in the bright afternoon sun but ready to come to life again when the light began to change toward evening. There is something quietly lovely about that rhythm, the way a place like this held its breath between the going and the coming, between the last car leaving in the morning and the first car pulling in at dusk. The rooms would be cool and still, the beds made up smooth and fresh, the little soaps in their wrappers, the towels folded on the rack, the window unit ready to hum to life when someone turned the dial. Everything in its place, everything ready. The highway outside would carry its steady current of travelers past, and some of them would keep going, and some of them would see the sign as the evening came on and would slow and turn and pull into the lot, and the whole gentle cycle would begin again. This is what the 1950s American Motel was. At its heart, not just a place to sleep, but a place where the ordinary rhythms of rest and rising, of arriving and departing, were given a kind of quiet form. A pause in the journey, a room with a key, a bar of soap, a bed made smooth and clean by careful hands, the sound of the highway outside, and the comfort of being, for one night, safely off it. There was nothing grand about it, and that was exactly the point. It was simple and warm and sufficient. And in the morning, when you pulled back out onto the road, you carried with you the small, uncomplicated gift of a good night's rest. And the highway stretched ahead, and the day was new, and everything was very gently, very quietly all right.